Queen Lyra stood motionless by the enormous viewport in her private chambers, gazing at the stars that seemed as cold and distant as her heart had become. 10 years had passed since the devastating war with the Terran Federation. 10 years since the news of Princess Aria's death had shattered her world. The loss of her only daughter had left a void that even ruling the mighty Xylos Empire could not fill. The royal attendants knew better than to disturb their queen during these moments of solitude. They had grown accustomed to her daily ritual, standing before the stars, one hand pressed against the transparent barrier, as if reaching for something forever lost among them. "Your Majesty," the soft voice of the Los, her most trusted advisor, broke the silence. "The council awaits your presence." Lyra didn't turn immediately. "Another debate about trade routes with the outer colonies, I presume?" "Among other matters." The Los hesitated. "General Corvin wishes to discuss increasing military patrols along the Terran border. There have been incidents." Now she turned, her silver eyes narrowing. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her pale blue skin pulsed briefly, a sign of irritation she no longer bothered to conceal. The peace treaties were signed 3 years ago. What incidents could possibly warrant such measures? Unidentified vessels, Your Majesty. Possibly smugglers taking advantage of the demilitarized zones. The Los averted his gaze from her penetrating stare. Or perhaps Terran reconnaissance, testing our defenses. Lyra moved away from the viewport, her long, intricately embroidered robes flowing behind her like liquid silver. The crown of crystalline structures that grew naturally from her skull, the biological marker of Xylosian royalty, caught the dim light of her chambers. "Peace remains fragile, the Los. We cannot afford provocations based on mere speculation." Her voice carried the authority that had guided the Empire through its darkest days. "I will not allow General Corvin to undermine years of diplomatic progress because of his lingering hatred for humans." The general lost his entire battalion during the Battle of Proxima, the Los reminded her gently. "His sentiments are shared by many." "As I lost my daughter," Lyra replied, her tone becoming glacial. "Yet here I stand, maintaining peace with those who took her from me." Remind the general of his duty to the Empire, not to his grudges. The communication panel on her desk illuminated, indicating an urgent message. Unusual, as her private channel was reserved for matters of highest security. Lyra activated it with a gesture. The holographic figure of Commander Nexus, head of Imperial Intelligence, appeared before her. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but I have information that requires your immediate attention. We've detected an anomaly in the Kestrel Nebula outpost." "What kind of anomaly?" "A distress signal, Your Majesty, using an old Royal Guard frequency." Nexus paused, his expression carefully controlled. "Specifically, one assigned to Princess Aria's personal escort vessel." The room seemed to grow colder. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flashed brilliantly before fading to a dim pulse. "Impossible. That ship was destroyed." "Confirmed destroyed with all hands lost." Her voice remained steady, betraying none of the sudden turmoil within. "Yes, Your Majesty. Most likely it's a sensor malfunction, or perhaps—" He hesitated. "Speak freely, Commander." "Or perhaps Terran intelligence operatives using captured Xylosian codes to provoke a reaction." Lyra considered this. It would be a reckless move, even for humans. When was the signal detected? 3 standard cycles ago. It appeared briefly, then vanished. We dismissed it as an equipment error until it reappeared today, stronger and more persistent. "And you're only informing me now?" The temperature in the room dropped perceptibly as Lyra's control over her abilities slipped. "Protocol dictated verification before bringing such sensitive information to your attention." Nexus bowed his head. "I did not wish to reopen old wounds without cause." Lyra turned back to the viewport, her reflection superimposed over the distant stars. "Deploy a stealth reconnaissance unit to the coordinates. Minimal presence, maximum discretion. I want all data transmitted directly to my secure terminal." "Your Majesty, General Corvin will insist on." "The general will not be informed." Lyra cut him off. "Not until we know what we're dealing with." As you command. Nexus's hologram flickered out. The Los approached cautiously. Your Majesty, if I may, perhaps this is merely a cruel coincidence? A technical error? Lyra's eyes remained fixed on the stars. Perhaps, but if there is even the slightest possibility. She stopped herself, unwilling to give voice to the hope that threatened to crack her carefully maintained composure. The council meeting, the Los reminded her. Gently, inform them I will be delayed. Lyra's decision was made. And the Los, this matter remains between us. Understood. Always, Your Majesty. As her advisor departed, Lyra placed her hand once more against the cold surface of the viewport. The impossible whisper of hope she had suppressed for a decade flickered to life inside her, fragile as a newborn star. Over the following days, similar reports continued to surface. The mysterious signal appeared and disappeared erratically, always moving, always elusive. Each report reached Lyra directly, bypassing normal channels. Against the advice of her intelligence officers, she ordered increasingly sophisticated resources dedicated to tracking the Phantom vessel. Your Majesty, this pursuit is becoming difficult to conceal, Commander Nexus reported one evening. General Corvin has requested an explanation for the redeployment of our stealth corvettes. Tell him it's a training exercise, Lyra replied without hesitation. Or better yet, inform him it's a matter of royal prerogative requiring no explanation. Nexus's hologram shifted uncomfortably. There's something else. The signal pattern has changed. It appears to be deliberately avoiding our patrol routes, while simultaneously drawing closer to our territory. Meaning, whoever is broadcasting knows our movements. They're being cautious, but they want to be found on their terms. Lyra considered this. Perhaps it's time we change the parameters of this hunt. Have the Starfang squadron move to intercept coordinates. Let our mysterious visitor know we're listening. For 3 more days, nothing happened. Lyra maintained her public duties while privately monitoring the search operation. Then, during a routine diplomatic reception, her personal communicator vibrated against her wrist. Excusing herself, she retreated to a private alcove. Speak. Contact, Your Majesty, came Nexus's terse reply. The vessel has emerged at the edge of the Thoris asteroid field. It's requesting emergency landing clearance at Outpost Vega. Visual confirmation? Attempting now. The vessel appears to be of Terran design, heavily modified and battle-scarred. But there's something else. It bears crude markings resembling Xylosian royal insignia. Lyra's heartbeat quickened. What is its condition? Unstable. Engine's signature shows severe fluctuations. This may not be a ruse, Your Majesty. They may genuinely require assistance. Making her decision instantly, Lyra commanded, grant clearance, but under maximum security protocols. I want the landing bay evacuated of all non-essential personnel, elite guards only, and keep General Corvin's people away from this. I'm departing for Outpost Vega immediately. Your Majesty, Nexus protested. Security protocols strongly advise against your presence during a potential first contact situation, especially with an unidentified Terran vessel. This is not open for discussion, Commander. Lyra ended the communication and turned to find the Los standing nearby, concern evident on his features. You heard. Enough, he acknowledged. I will make arrangements for your departure. Have my personal shuttle prepared. Minimum crew, maximum speed. Hours later, Queen Lyra's royal shuttle approached Outpost Vega, a small but strategically important installation embedded within a hollowed-out asteroid. From her viewport, she could see the mysterious vessel had already landed, surrounded by a ring of armed guards. The ship was indeed of Terran origin, an older model gunship, the kind used extensively during the war. Yet it had been extensively modified, with components that appeared Xylosian in design grafted onto its hull. Most striking were the faded royal insignia painted across its side, not the work of Xylosian artisans, but a rough approximation created by someone familiar with the symbols. As Lyra's shuttle docked, Commander Nexus awaited her, tension evident in his rigid posture. Report, she demanded, striding down the ramp with the Los close behind. The vessel is secured, Your Majesty. Life support systems are failing, which appears to have necessitated their emergency landing. We detect 2 life forms aboard, 1 human, 1. He hesitated. 1 what, Commander? 1 reading consistent with Xylosian physiology, but with anomalies. Lyra maintained her regal composure, though the bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin brightened perceptibly. Has communication been established? They've requested to speak only with you, Your Majesty. They say, Nexus swallowed. They say they have information vital to both our species, information about the true enemy that orchestrated the war. Open a channel. Your Majesty, security protocols. Now, Commander. A holographic communication screen materialized before them. For a moment, only static appeared. Then the image stabilized to reveal the interior of the Terran vessel. 2 figures stood side by side, one unmistakably human, tall and broad-shouldered in a modified Terran military uniform bearing the insignia of a commander. Beside him, Lyra's composure shattered. The crown of crystalline structures adorning her head flashed with brilliant blue light as her emotions surged beyond control. The female Xylosian on the screen was changed. 1 arm appeared to be a cybernetic replacement, and a distinctive scar ran from her temple across her left eye, which gleamed with the metallic sheen of an artificial implant. But the pattern of her facial bioluminescence, the structure of her natural crown, these were unmistakable. Arya, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Hello, Mother. The voice was deeper, hardened by years of hardship, but undeniably belonged to her daughter. I've come home, but I haven't come alone. She gestured to the human beside her. This is Commander Jake Renner of the Terran Federation. Once my enemy, now my ally, and more. The human, Renner, stood protectively close to Arya, his stance suggesting both readiness to defend and deep respect. Your Majesty, he acknowledged with a formal nod. I understand your suspicion, but I assure you we come in peace. More importantly, we come with truth. Around Lyra, the Xylosian guards shifted uneasily, weapons still trained on the vessel. General mistrust of humans ran deep, and the sight of a Terran standing beside their lost princess was creating visible confusion and anger. The truth. Lyra found her voice again, struggling to process the reality before her. The truth is that my daughter was reported killed in action 10 years ago. Her vessel was destroyed with all hands. That was the intended outcome, Arya replied. But fate and Commander Renner had other plans. Mother, we need to speak with you privately. What we have to share affects the future of both our peoples. Nexus stepped forward. Your Majesty, this could be an elaborate deception. The human must be detained for questioning, and this individual claiming to be the princess should submit to genetic verification. I'll submit to whatever tests you require, Arya said calmly. But Jake remains with me, unrestrained and treated as an honored guest. Those are my conditions. The outrage among the Xylosian guards was palpable. One officer stepped forward, his bioluminescence flashing with anger. This human should be in chains. How dare he stand beside a royal and make demands? Because without him, there would be no royals standing here at all, Arya replied sharply. He saved my life when his orders were to ensure my death. Everything I've learned, everything I've discovered about who really orchestrated the war between our people, began with his choice to defy those orders. Lyra raised her hand for silence, never taking her eyes from the screen. Lower your weapons, she commanded. All of them. Your Majesty, Nexus began to protest. I said lower them. Her tone left no room for argument. Princess Arya and Commander Renner will be escorted to my private chambers aboard this outpost. Commander Nexus, you and the Los will accompany us. No one else. At least allow me to place restraints on the human, Nexus pleaded. The human has a name, Lyra replied coldly. And if he truly saved my daughter when he had every reason not to, then he has earned the right to walk freely in my presence. She turned her gaze directly to Renner. For now, the airlock of the Terran vessel cycled open. Princess Arya emerged first, her movements betraying a slight limp. another souvenir of her near-death experience. The cybernetic arm gleamed dully under the harsh lights of the landing bay. Behind her came Commander Renner, his posture alert but non-threatening. Up close, the changes in Arya were even more pronounced. The youthful softness was gone from her face, replaced by the sharp angles of someone who had survived against impossible odds. Her natural crown of crystalline formations had been damaged, with one spire noticeably shorter than the others, broken and healed imperfectly. For a long moment, mother and daughter stood facing each other, separated by 10 years of grief and presumed death. Then, defying all royal protocol, Lyra stepped forward and embraced Arya, her normally controlled bioluminescence blazing with emotion. "You're real," she whispered. "You're alive." Arya returned the embrace with equal fervor. "I've missed you, Mother. Every day. For 10 years. When they finally separated, Lyra's gaze shifted to Renner. The human commander stood respectfully aside, allowing the reunion its moment. His face bore its own scars, a jagged line across his jaw, and eyes that had seen too much death. "Commander Renner," Lyra addressed him directly. "I'm told I owe you my daughter's life." He shook his head slightly. "We've saved each other many times over the years, Your Majesty. What began as an impulsive act of conscience has become something more important than either of us." "Then let us discuss this importance," Lyra replied, her royal composure returning. "Follow me." The small group made their way through the outpost to a secure chamber designed for high-level diplomatic meetings. Guards stationed outside were dismissed, leaving only Lyra, Arya, Renner, Nexus, and the Los within the soundproofed room. Once seated, Lyra spoke directly. 10 years ago, your ship was reported destroyed in the Battle of Arconis. All evidence supported this conclusion. How did you survive?" Arya exchanged a glance with Renner before answering. "My ship was indeed destroyed, but not by Terran forces as reported. I was on an inspection tour near the border when we were ambushed. Our attacker used Terran signal patterns, but employed tactics I'd never seen before." She leaned forward. "Mother, they knew exactly where to hit us to disable our identification beacon while making it appear we'd been completely destroyed." "Who is that?" Nexus interrupted skeptically. "We call them the Orion Syndicate," Renner said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. "Though that's likely just one of many names they operate under. They're a powerful interplanetary corporation with tentacles in weapons development, resource extraction, and political manipulation." "A corporation?" The Los sounded incredulous. "You expect us to believe a mere business enterprise orchestrated a war between two interstellar powers?" "Not a mere business," Arya countered. "An organization that has existed in shadow for perhaps centuries, accumulating wealth and influence while keeping its true structure hidden. Think of them as a parasite that thrives on conflict." Renner nodded. "They don't just profit from war, they engineer it." The Syndicate had operatives within both the Terran Federation and the Xylos Empire. They manipulated events, creating incidents that would escalate tensions. "Such as the destruction of Outpost Thera?" Lyra asked, referring to the Xylosian research station whose obliteration had been the final spark igniting the war. "Exactly," Arya confirmed. Officials on both sides were led to believe the other was responsible. In reality, it was a Syndicate Black Ops team using stolen Terran technology. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "These are extraordinary claims that challenge everything we've believed for a decade. What evidence can you provide?" In response, Renner activated a portable projection device. The air above the conference table filled with three-dimensional images, ship logs, intercepted communications, surveillance footage. "This is only a fraction of what we've gathered," he explained. "We've spent years piecing it together, infiltrating Syndicate operations, recovering data fragments from battle sites, interviewing defectors who realized they were being used. The evidence was compelling. Records showing mysterious ships present at key battle sites, using sophisticated cloaking technology to remain undetected while recording tactical data from both sides. communications revealing how information was selectively filtered before reaching high command on either side, ensuring maximum hostility. Most damning were financial trails showing how the same shadowy conglomerate had supplied weapons to both Xylos and Terran forces through various shell companies, profiting immensely from the escalating conflict. And this, Arya added, bringing up another file. The Syndicate's strategic resource acquisition plan. While our peoples were busy destroying each other, they moved into disputed territories, harvesting rare minerals and establishing bases that neither side noticed in the chaos of war. Commander Nexus studied the data with growing concern. If this is authentic, the implications are staggering. But why? Lyra's question cut through the heavy silence that had fallen. Why target our civilizations specifically? Resources, initially, Renner explained. Both the Empire and the Federation controlled access to materials the Syndicate needed. But I believe it went beyond that. Together, our civilizations represented the greatest potential threat to their operations. Divided and weakened by war, we became their playground. The Los, who had been quietly absorbing everything, finally spoke. Your Majesty, while this evidence is compelling, accepting it means acknowledging that we've been pawns in someone else's game. The political ramifications within the Empire would be explosive. Not to mention, Nexus added, that cooperation with humans would face fierce resistance from many quarters, particularly the military. Lyra's gaze remained fixed on her daughter. You still haven't explained how you survived, or how you came to ally with Commander Renner. Arya's bioluminescence dimmed slightly, a sign of painful memories. When our ship was attacked, I was thrown clear during the initial explosion. My escape pod was damaged, life support failing. I was adrift, barely conscious, when Commander Renner's patrol ship detected the debris field. Renner continued the story. I was a tactical officer then, leading a small reconnaissance unit. We were understanding orders to eliminate any Xylosian forces encountered, but he glanced at Arya. When we found her pod and I saw who was inside, something didn't add up. The attack pattern didn't match standard engagement protocols. And executing an injured enemy, especially one of her status. He shook his head. I couldn't do it. You risked court-martial, Lyra observed. I did more than risk it, Your Majesty. I received it. A grim smile crossed his face. I reported the pod as empty and took my ship into the unpatrolled sector near the Kestrel Nebula, ostensibly to investigate anomalous readings. Instead, I stabilized Princess Arya's condition using our medical bay, which wasn't designed for Xylosian physiology, Arya added, touching her cybernetic arm. We had to improvise. For weeks, we hid in asteroid fields and nebula clouds while I recovered, and Jake faced the reality of what he'd done. He couldn't return to Terran space without explaining my presence, and I couldn't return to the Empire. Not when we began to suspect the attack on my ship wasn't random. We became reluctant allies, Renner said, sharing what we knew, comparing accounts of how the war had started from each side's perspective. The inconsistencies were too numerous to ignore. So you've been fugitives for 10 years? The Los asked. How did you avoid detection for so long? We weren't always together, Arya explained. There were periods when we operated separately, infiltrating our respective societies for information. Jake had contacts in the Terran underground, officers who had questioned the war narrative and been sidelined. I used royal security codes to access Xylosian archives without revealing my identity. And somewhere along this journey, Lyra observed with surprising gentleness, you became more than allies. Arya's bioluminescence brightened in a pattern that, to Xylosian eyes, signified deep emotional connection. Yes, that was unexpected. Renner reached across the table, taking Arya's natural hand in his own, but not unwelcome. Despite our differences, or perhaps because of them, we found something worth fighting for beyond just the truth. Lyra studied them both for a long moment. The battle-hardened Terran commander and her transformed daughter, an impossible pairing born from impossible circumstances. She rose from her seat and moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars that separated their worlds. If what you've shown me is true, she said finally, then everything I believed Everything I've built policy upon for the past decade has been founded on deception. The anger I've harbored, the grief I've endured. She turned back to face them. But verification will be necessary. Commander Nexus, arrange for our intelligence division to authenticate these records. The Los prepare contingency plans for diplomatic contact with specified Terran officials. You believe us? Arya asked, hope evident in her voice. I believe you're my daughter, Lyra replied. The evidence of my eyes and heart confirms this beyond any doubt. As for the rest, she gestured to the projected data still hovering above the table. If even half of this is accurate, then both our civilizations face a threat greater than we imagined. And I will not allow the Xylos Empire to remain a pawn in someone else's game. Renner straightened. The Syndicate isn't omniscient, Your Majesty. They have vulnerabilities, but exposing them will require something unprecedented. Cooperation between our peoples on a scale not seen in living memory. And there will be resistance, Arya warned. The Syndicate has agents at high levels in both governments. Once they realize we're onto them, they'll work to discredit us, perhaps even engineer new conflicts to distract from the truth. Lyra's expression hardened with determination. Then we must move quickly and carefully. The Los established secure communication with the Terran diplomatic attaché, the one who negotiated the cessation of hostilities. If I recall correctly, Ambassador Eliza Chun showed unusual dedication to achieving peace despite political headwinds. She may be receptive to our overture. And General Corvin? Nexus asked cautiously. The general will not be informed at this stage, Lyra decided. His antipathy toward humans makes him a potential liability until we've gathered more allies within the government. As preparations were made, Lyra found herself alone with Arya and Renner for a brief moment. The formal atmosphere dissipated slightly, allowing the weight of personal reality to settle upon them. 10 years, Lyra said softly, studying her daughter's face. You've changed so much, grown stronger in ways I never would have wished for you, but can only admire now. Good. Teachers, Arya replied, glancing at Renner. Survival is a powerful motivator, as is love. Lyra addressed Renner directly. Commander, I have not properly thanked you for saving my daughter's life. That debt cannot be quantified. There is no debt, Your Majesty, he replied with genuine respect. If you want to thank me, help us finish what we started. The Syndicate has taken too much from too many for too long. Lyra nodded thoughtfully. You are not what I expected, Commander Renner. Perhaps humans rarely are. This will be an adjustment. Mother, Arya said gently, I know this is overwhelming. If you need time, time is precisely what we lack, Lyra interrupted. If your information is correct, the Syndicate has had a decade to entrench themselves further within our systems. Every moment we delay gives them advantage. She straightened, her regal bearing returning. I am still queen of the Xylos Empire. I have mourned you for 10 years, daughter. I will not waste another day now that you've returned. Over the next several days, a carefully orchestrated dance of diplomacy and intelligence gathering began. Using secure channels known only to the highest levels of Xylosian government, Lyra established contact with Ambassador Chun on the Terran side. Initial communications were cautious, coded, revealing only enough to spark interest without exposing their full hand. Meanwhile, Nexus's most trusted agents painstakingly verified the evidence Arya and Renner had brought. Each confirmation added weight to their claims, building a case that could no longer be dismissed as fantasy or Terran manipulation. Ambassador Chun has agreed to a secure meeting, the Los reported during one of their strategy sessions. However, she insists on bringing Dr. Eliana Vaziri, the Federation's chief science officer. Apparently, Dr. Vaziri has been conducting her own investigation into anomalies during the war. Can it be trusted? Lyra asked Renner directly. He considered carefully. Chun has a reputation for integrity. She was one of the few voices in the Federation government consistently pushing for peace talks, even during the most intense fighting. As for Dr. Vaziri, she's brilliant and principled. If she's noticed irregularities, she'll follow the evidence regardless of political pressure. The meeting was arranged at a neutral scientific outpost in the demilitarized zone, ostensibly for a review of shared environmental monitoring protocols. Security was tight but unobtrusive, with only a handful of personnel from each side aware of the true purpose. Ambassador Chun proved to be a slender, silver-haired woman with piercing eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Vaziri, by contrast, projected an air of academic detachment that did little to hide her keen intelligence. Both women reacted with controlled shock when Arya entered the conference room, and with even greater surprise when Queen Lyra herself appeared. "This is unexpected," Chen managed, composing herself quickly. "We were told this meeting concerned evidence of treaty violations." "In a manner of speaking, it does," Lyra replied, "though not by either of our governments directly." Over the next several hours, Arya and Renner presented their evidence again, this time tailored for Terran perspectives. Dr. Vaziri's initial skepticism gave way to growing alarm as she cross-referenced the data with her own research. "The anomalous radiation signatures at the Battle of Proxima," she murmured, almost to herself. "I could never account for them with known Xylosian technology. But if a third party was present, using cloaked observation vessels—" "Exactly," Renner confirmed. "They weren't just watching. They were collecting tactical data from both sides, learning our strengths and weaknesses, improving their own systems." Chen's expression had grown increasingly grave. "If this syndicate exists as you describe, they represent a threat unlike anything we've prepared for. They don't seek conquest in the traditional sense. They feed on the conflict itself, which makes them more dangerous, not less," Lyra pointed out. "An enemy who desires your territory can be deterred or satisfied. An enemy who profits from your destruction will never stop manufacturing reasons for war. But exposing them won't be simple," Dr. Vaziri cautioned. "Public revelation of this conspiracy would cause chaos in both our societies. People who have lost loved ones to the war would struggle to accept that their sacrifices serve someone else's agenda. Not to mention," Chen added, "the syndicate's agents within our governments would move immediately to discredit or silence us. We need irrefutable proof and a strategy for delivering it simultaneously to both our peoples." "We have someone inside," Renner revealed after a moment's hesitation. "A mid-level syndicate operative who became disillusioned when he discovered the full scope of their manipulations. He's provided intelligence on an upcoming operation, a major resource extraction project in the Ceres cluster." "The Ceres cluster?" Belos looked alarmed. "That's a protected zone under the peace treaty. Neither Xylos nor Terran forces are permitted there. Precisely why the syndicate selected it," Arya explained. "They're planning to provoke an incident, make it appear that one side violated the treaty, then capitalize on the renewed hostilities." "When?" Chun asked sharply. 15 days from now," Renner answered. "They're moving significant assets into position already." Lyra turned to Commander Nexus. "Can we assemble a joint task force within that time frame? One comprised of personnel we can absolutely trust." "Difficult, but not impossible," he replied after consideration. "The greater challenge will be operational security. The moment unusual deployments are detected, questions will arise. Then we must create a convincing cover," Dr. Vaziri suggested. "Perhaps a joint scientific expedition? My department has been requesting access to the cluster's unique stellar phenomena for years. With appropriate security escort, of course," Chun added, catching on quickly. "Nothing unusual about protecting valuable scientific assets in a remote region." As the planning progressed, the unlikely alliance began to take shape. Each side contributed their strengths: Xylosian stealth technology, Terran electronic warfare capabilities, shared intelligence on suspected syndicate sympathizers within their respective chains of command. Yet tensions remained. During one particularly heated strategy session, a Xylosian intelligence officer clashed with his Terran counterpart over tactical priorities. "Your approach leaves our flank exposed," the Xylosian officer argued. "Are you deliberately setting us up for casualties? If we move as you suggest, we lose the element of surprise entirely," the Terran commander shot back. "Or is that your intention?" Perhaps some would prefer the mission to fail. Arya stepped between them, her authority as princess cutting through the hostility. Enough! This is exactly what the Syndicate has exploited for years, our inability to see past our differences. They're counting on this distrust. Renner joined her. We've spent a decade piecing together their methods. They insert small doubts, create minor frustrations, then watch them blossom into major conflicts. Don't do their work for them. The chastened officers returned to their planning. The moment of conflict passed, but not forgotten. Similar scenes played out repeatedly as the operation took shape, each one a microcosm of the larger challenge they faced, overcoming a decade of ingrained hostility to confront a common enemy. As the day of the operation approached, Queen Lyra found herself once again alone with her daughter and Renner in her private chambers aboard the royal vessel that would command the Xylosian contingent of their joint force. "There's something we haven't discussed," Lyra said, breaking a comfortable silence. "What happens after, assuming we succeed?" Arya exchanged a glance with Renner before responding. "You mean between us?" "Between all of us," Lyra clarified. "You are still princess of the Xylos Empire, Arya. Your return from the dead will create political complications I can manage, but your relationship with Commander Renner—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There is no precedent for such a union." "We're aware of the challenges," Renner said quietly. "We've had years to consider them. And yet you've chosen this path regardless," Lyra observed, no judgment in her tone. Arya's expression softened. "Some choices transcend politics, Mother. What Jake and I found together, across the divide of species and conflict, it's rare and precious. If we succeed against the Syndicate, perhaps it can also symbolize something greater for both our peoples. A bridge between worlds," Lyra mused, "though not an easy one to cross." She turned to Renner. "My daughter has chosen you, Commander. That alone grants you consideration in my eyes. But I would know your intentions clearly." Renner straightened, meeting the Queen's penetrating gaze directly. "My intention, Your Majesty, is to stand beside Arya for as long as she'll have me, to support her role as princess while continuing our work against the Syndicate and those like them. I understand the political complexities this creates, and I'm prepared to navigate them respectfully, even if it means never truly belonging in either world." Lyra pressed. "The Federation may view you as a traitor, the Empire as an interloper. With respect, Your Majesty, belonging isn't about universal acceptance," Renner replied. "It's about finding your place alongside those who matter most. Arya is where I belong." Lyra studied him silently for a long moment before turning back to her daughter. "Your father would have appreciated his directness, if nothing else." A faint smile softened her features. Theron always said diplomats spent too many words saying too little. Arya's bioluminescence flickered with surprise. Her mother rarely spoke of her father, whose death before the war had left wounds that never fully healed. "I've made my decision," Lyra announced, rising from her seat with royal precision. "When this operation concludes, successfully as it must, I will formally recognize your relationship. There will be opposition, traditionalists who cannot see beyond ancient prejudices, but they will adapt or be left behind. The Empire must evolve if it is to truly flourish in peace." "Thank you, Mother," Arya said, the patterns beneath her skin pulsing with emotion. "Don't thank me yet," Lyra replied with unexpected warmth. "I'm merely acknowledging what already exists." "And Commander Renner." She turned to him. "I suspect the challenges ahead will prove more than sufficient as a test of your commitment to my daughter." "I've never shied away from a challenge, Your Majesty," he answered with a slight smile. As the day of the operation dawned, tension permeated both the Xylosian and Terran vessels assembled for the mission. Disguised as a joint scientific expedition, the first of its kind since the war, the fleet approached the Ceres cluster with deliberate caution. Scientists from both species went about their legitimate research, their instruments gathering valuable data, even as they served as perfect cover for the military operation unfolding around them. On the bridge of the Xylosian command ship, Queen Lyra received final confirmation from their intelligence sources. "The Syndicate operation is proceeding as predicted," Commander Nexus reported. Their extraction vessels are moving into position under cover of a modified cloaking system. They believe their presence remains undetected. And their provocateurs? Lyra asked. 2 vessels, one disguised with Xylosian identification markers, the other with Terran, Nexus confirmed. They're positioned to stage an incident once the extraction is underway. Lyra nodded grimly. Ambassador Chun, are your forces in position? Chen's holographic image flickered slightly as she responded from the Terran command vessel. Affirmative. Dr. Vaziri's sensor modifications are operating perfectly. We're tracking the Syndicate ships despite their cloaking technology. Then we proceed as planned, Lyra declared. May wisdom guide our actions today. The joint Xylosian-Terran task force moved with synchronized precision. While the scientific vessels continued their research at the edge of the cluster, military craft slipped into strategic positions, their own advanced stealth systems rendering them nearly invisible. They formed a net, silent and patient, waiting for the Syndicate to spring their own trap. They didn't have to wait long. The extraction began, massive Syndicate ships deploying mining equipment to harvest rare stellar materials from the cluster's unique composition. Simultaneously, the 2 provocateur vessels moved into position, weapons powering up. They're activating weapons systems, reported a Terran tactical officer over the shared command channel. The Xylosian-marked vessel is targeting our research ship, while the Terran-marked one is aiming at yours. Classic false flag. Perfect symmetry. Arya commented bitterly from her position beside her mother. They've learned from experience how to maximize mutual suspicion. Not this time, Lyra declared. All units, execute Operation Daybreak. The carefully laid trap closed. Joint Xylosian-Terran forces decloaked simultaneously, surrounding the Syndicate operation. Commander Renner, leading the Terran tactical wing, directed precise strikes that disabled the provocateur vessels before they could fire a single shot. Meanwhile, Xylosian ships deployed advanced containment fields around the extraction vessels, neutralizing their systems without destruction. Multiple Syndicate vessels attempting emergency jump protocols, Nexus reported. Interception teams in pursuit. The primary target? Lyra demanded. Confirm present, Arya replied, studying the tactical display. The command ship is holding position at the center of their formation. Exactly where our intelligence said it would be. Lyra's expression hardened. Then it's time for the final phase. Commander Renner, you may proceed with the boarding operation. Acknowledged, Renner's voice came through clearly. Boarding teams are go. Transmission systems standing by. What followed was a testament to the effectiveness of their unlikely alliance. Mixed teams of Xylosian and Terran special forces, trained together in the brief time available, executed coordinated assaults on key Syndicate vessels. The fighting was intense, but focused, with strict orders to secure rather than destroy, to capture rather than kill. The operation's true objective lay not just in stopping this single Syndicate plot, but in obtaining irrefutable evidence of their entire conspiracy. The command ship contained the archives they needed, proof that could be broadcast simultaneously to both civilizations, breaking the cycle of manipulation forever. Aboard her vessel, Lyra watched the tactical displays with composed tension. Beside her, Arya monitored communications from the boarding teams, her features tight with concern for Renner, who led the primary assault on the command ship. Team Alpha has breached the central section, Arya reported as updates flowed in, encountering heavy resistance. Beta and Gamma teams moving to support. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Casualty reports began filtering through. Losses on both sides, though the joint force maintained the advantage of surprise and superior coordination. Command deck secured, came Renner's voice finally, strained but triumphant. We have control of their systems, and confirmation on primary target acquisition. A ripple of tension passed through the bridge. The primary target was not merely Data, but the architect of the entire conspiracy, the elusive leader of the Orion Syndicate, known only as the Director. Transmission systems are online, reported a Terran communications officer. ready to broadcast on your command. Lyra exchanged glances with Ambassador Chen's holographic image, then with her daughter. This moment would irrevocably change both their civilizations, revealing a decade of manipulation and forcing a painful reckoning with the truth. "Begin the transmission," Lyra ordered. "All channels, all frequencies, to both Xylosian and Terran worlds simultaneously. Across thousands of planets, moons, and space stations throughout both civilizations, regular transmissions were suddenly interrupted. Government channels, entertainment networks, personal communications, all displayed the same split-screen image. Queen Lyra of the Xylos Empire and the Terran Federation President, broadcasting jointly from their respective command centers. Citizens of the Xylos Empire, Lyra began with solemn authority. People of the Terran Federation, the President continued from his end. Today, our forces have undertaken a joint operation to expose and neutralize a threat that has manipulated our civilizations for more than a decade, they announced in carefully synchronized statements. What followed was a meticulously prepared presentation of evidence, documents, recordings, tactical data, financial trails, all pointing to the Syndicate's orchestration of the devastating war. The broadcast included testimony from captured Syndicate operatives, extracted from the command ship's databases, admitting to false flag operations and deliberate escalation of hostilities. Most damning was the live image of the director himself, a figure of cold calculation now in custody, his extensive network of influence laid bare for all to see. His operations had extended far beyond merely profiting from the war. The Syndicate had been positioning itself to become the shadow power behind both civilizations, playing each against the other while extracting wealth and influence from both. As the evidence mounted, reactions across both civilizations ranged from shock to outrage to disbelief. Protests erupted in some regions, while urgent government sessions were convened in others. Military commands were thrown into confusion as officers tried to reconcile this new reality with a decade of perceived truth. "It will take time," Ambassador Chen observed grimly as reports of the initial reactions came in. For many, accepting this means confronting the possibility that loved ones died for a lie. "Not a lie," Arya corrected. "Our people still fought for what they believed was right, to protect their homes and families. The lie was only in who truly threatened them." Days blurred into weeks as the aftermath unfolded. The Joint Task Force remained deployed, not only to secure Syndicate prisoners and assets, but as a visible symbol of the new cooperation between species. Queen Lyra and key Terran officials worked tirelessly to manage the political earthquake they had triggered, supporting reformists within both governments while neutralizing hardliners who refused to accept the new reality. The process was neither smooth nor universally embraced. Riots broke out on several Xylosian worlds when Princess Aria's relationship with Commander Renner became public knowledge. Similarly, Terran military circles saw significant upheaval, with some officers refusing to acknowledge the truth about the war regardless of evidence. Yet amid the turmoil, something unprecedented began to take shape. Joint committees formed to investigate and dismantle remaining Syndicate operations. Scientific exchanges, begun as cover for the military operation, blossomed into genuine collaborative research. Cultural ambassadors cautiously established the first formal programs for civilian exchange between the species. 1 month after the operation, Queen Lyra stood once again before the enormous viewport in her private chambers aboard the royal flagship, now in orbit around the Xylosian homeworld. The stars seemed different somehow, no longer cold and distant, but full of new possibilities. "The Council awaits your address, Your Majesty," the Los announced from the doorway. They finally agreed to terms for the new treaty. Lyra nodded. "And General Corvin? He has tendered his resignation, as expected," the Los replied, "though the significant faction of the military still supports his position." "Let them," Lyra said with quiet confidence. "Time and truth are on our side." She turned as Arya entered, accompanied by Renner. Both wore formal attire that blended elements of their respective cultures, a visual statement of their commitment to building bridges between worlds. The Terran delegation has arrived, Arya reported. President Mackenzie himself, along with their full diplomatic corps. It's the first time a Federation president has set foot on Xylosian soil. Historic days, Lyra observed, though not without their challenges. Speaking of challenges, Renner said with a wry smile, your security detail seems particularly attentive today. I've been scanned at least 6 times since breakfast. Protocol, Commander, Lyra replied with the faintest hint of amusement, though perhaps somewhat more rigorous than strictly necessary. Old habits die hard, especially among those tasked with protecting the royal family. They'll adapt, Arya said confidently, her natural hand finding Renner's. As we all must. Together, they proceeded toward the Great Hall, where representatives from both civilizations awaited. The formal signing of what would come to be known as the Series Accords would establish not merely peace, but active alliance between their peoples. An alliance born from shared trauma, but looking toward shared prosperity. As they walked, Lyra found herself studying her daughter and the human who had saved her. They moved in perfect synchronization despite their physical differences, each anticipating the other's movements with unconscious ease. More than mere allies, more than symbols of reconciliation, they had found something genuine and valuable across the divide of species and conflict. Commander Renner, Lyra said suddenly, pausing before they entered the Great Hall. He turned, respectful but no longer intimidated by her royal presence. Your Majesty? Jake, she corrected, using his given name for the first time. I believe you have successfully passed the test I mentioned. His expression shifted to one of surprised understanding. I wasn't aware the test had a completion date, Your Majesty. Lyra, she offered in return. In private settings at least, and all tests must conclude eventually. Her bioluminescence brightened in the pattern that signified formal acceptance. You have proven yourself not merely worthy of my daughter's affection, but a valuable ally to our people. Whatever the future holds, you have earned your place here. The formal ceremony that followed embodied the transformation occurring throughout both civilizations. Ancient enemies now stood side by side, signing accords that would bind their futures together. Scientists and scholars eagerly exchanged ideas too long kept separate by conflict. Military officers cautiously discussed joint defense strategies against threats that might arise from remnants of the syndicate. When it came time for Queen Lyra to address the assembled dignitaries, she stood tall, her natural crown gleaming under the ceremonial lights. Today marks not merely the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, she declared. It represents the recognition of a truth we should never have forgotten, that despite our differences in form and culture, we share this vast cosmos and the challenges it presents. United, we are stronger than the forces that would divide us for profit and power. She gestured to where Arya and Renner stood together. Some among us have already discovered that the boundaries between our peoples are more permeable than we believed. From their example, let us learn that connection can be found across even the widest divides. Later, as celebrations continued throughout the capital, Lyra found a moment of quiet on a balcony overlooking the city. The night was clear, stars visible beyond the atmospheric shimmer, with lights from Terran vessels visible in high orbit. No longer a threat, but partners in a new alliance. Arya joined her, leaning against the railing. For a while, mother and daughter simply stood in companionable silence, watching their world embrace a future neither had imagined possible a year earlier. When I was young, Arya said finally, you taught me that a queen must sometimes sacrifice personal happiness for the good of the empire. I always wondered if that burden had become too heavy for you. After father died, Lyra's bioluminescence dimmed slightly at the memory. It was never the burden that troubled me, but the isolation. Leaders must often stand apart from those they lead. She turned to study her daughter's face. You found a different path. Not entirely different, Arya countered gently. I still serve the Empire, just not in the way we once expected. Perhaps that's the greatest gift to emerge from all this pain. The freedom to forge new connections, new ways of serving. Renner approached, hesitating at the threshold until Lyra gestured him forward. "The Terran delegates are preparing to return to their ships," he reported. "President Mackenzie asked me to convey his personal thanks for your hospitality. Will you be joining them?" Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. "No, Your Majesty," he replied with quiet certainty. "My place is here now." Lyra nodded, her gaze returning to the stars above. "Then welcome home, Commander Renner." A hint of her earlier humor returned. "Though I suspect your true trials are only beginning. Royal protocol can be far more demanding than battlefield tactics." "I've been warning him," Arya said with a laugh that would have been unimaginable in the solemn princess of 10 years ago. "But he insists he's faced worse." "Perspective is everything," Renner observed philosophically. "After facing down the Syndicate and bringing together civilizations that spent a decade at war, well, learning which fork to use at state dinners seems manageable." Their laughter mingled in the night air, three individuals from vastly different backgrounds united by shared purpose and newfound understanding. Beyond them, two civilizations took their first tentative steps toward a future where ancient enemies would become essential allies, where differences would be studied rather than feared, and where the wounds of war might finally begin to heal. As Queen Lyra watched her daughter and this remarkable human who had crossed impossible boundaries to stand beside her, she felt something she had not experienced in many years. Genuine hope for the future, not merely of her empire, but of all who inhabited the stars they shared.